Nick, what's up, man? Welcome to the Dad Edge podcast, brother.
Thank you for having me. This has been one that I've been waiting for. Excited to talk.
Dude, I'm honored, man. Me too. We're going to talk about a lot of good stuff, man. Hey, before we get started today, how about a couple warm-up questions just for fun?
Yeah.
All right. Something that brings you tremendous amount of joy outside of work. What do you like to do? And it doesn't have to be family related either. It can be just something for you.
Jiu-Jitsu, 100%.
Yeah. How long have you been doing that?
Almost 2.5 years.
What do you like most about jiu-jitsu?
Man, let me tell you something. We everyone has stuff, right? We all have stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to call it. That's why I call it stuff instead of problems, because it's just, we all have it. Right. And as men, typically you're thinking about your kids, your wife, your job, your bills, your goals, and they might not even be stressors, right? They might just be things that are on your mind constantly. When you step on the mats and another man is trying to kill you in your clothes, you're not thinking about any of those things. That is the one time, even I think it's better than meditation, because in meditation, you can drift off, right? If you drift off while you're training, you're going to be put to sleep. So it is the one time, man, that you are solely present in that training. You are nowhere else. You're not thinking about your kids. You're not thinking about your job. You're not thinking about your boss, your bills, your savings, your goals. You are truly in that moment.
Awesome, man. I am not surprised. If you're in the fight or flight mode, about ready to be choked out, you better not be like, what do I got going on tomorrow?
Yeah, what am I having for dinner? I wonder what my wife's making for dinner tonight.
Oh yeah, we're having steak. Oh, good night.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Favorite sport you played growing up?
Oh man, we'll have to get into that. I did not really play sports growing up.
What? I'm shocked, man. I follow you on the gram, and obviously you got some athleticism.
I did, yeah. But single mom. I was a little bit more of she put me in some sports. Like I played basketball for maybe half a season. I did like soccer. I think I scored more goals for the other team in soccer than I did for my own team. There wasn't nothing serious. When I got in trouble, I was on a wrestling team in 7th grade.
Nice. Okay.
But because of my grades, I couldn't really be on the wrestling team, but the coach felt bad for me. So he kept me on. Anyways, yeah. So wasn't really able to do sports as like a ongoing thing as a child.
Got it. Okay. Okay. What has been a funny or embarrassing moment with either your current wife or even on a date with a random woman? What's something funny that has happened to you or embarrassing?
Oh man. I don't get it. I don't really get embarrassed. So I don't know. I'd have to ask her.
While you're thinking of one, I've never told this story on the podcast, but I was 17. I took this girl out and it was a first date. And it's one of those things where it's like, first date, teenagers like, I don't want to eat in front of this chick. Like, yeah. It's like, I do that not in front of people or in front of dudes. Right. And she said something funny as I was eating my food and I laughed and I spit food and it landed in her hair.
Oh, awesome. Right. That's like some stuff that should be in a movie. Yeah.
It actually turned out to be like a 8-month relationship. So it wasn't a deal breaker for her. So, but yeah, if you don't have one, no big deal. But
we got caught. We did get caught one time fooling around.
Okay.
Yeah, that was probably, we were at a friend's house and we were out in her truck and all the lights, like the security lights came on and everybody came outside not knowing. And here we are fooling around on the back of her truck. So we're like, hi, but we're married and have a kid, another one on the way soon. So
dude, I love it. I love it. What's funny is, so it was about 9 months ago, my wife and I went out on a date night and we were just having this great time, just awesome time. And just everything was clicking. And then we're sitting there and she's like, hey, why don't we get the bill and go fool around in the car? And I was like, we've been married 18 years. And I'm like, are you serious? And she's like, yeah. And I could tell. Yeah. I'm like, check, please. Right. Hit the check. We literally like drive the car off into this corner of the parking lot, and you just have like those jitters, right? You're like, oh shit, like what if we get caught? Like, what if we're on camera? What if a cop comes? And I sat there and I thought about it, and I was like, Jessica, it's like, we've been married 18 years. If a cop catches us messing around, like there might be a part of him that he's either going to be like, guys, go home, or he'll be like, carry on. That's awesome. Right. I'm out of here.
It's not like you're a couple of teenage kids like hiding from their parents or anything, right?
Yeah, exactly, man. All right.
And you should. And that's something I highly suggest that you should go fool around in random places with your wife. Yeah,
that's right. Make society proud. Exactly. All right, man, let's get into this. So you said you were raised by a single mother. I heard that obviously in how you answered one of the questions. Just tell me, how did you grow up?
Like a gypsy moving around in a caravan. We moved around probably every 6 months to a year, up until I was probably about 13-ish. And I used to think we were running from the law, but it really was, she was just going from one job to the next, trying to survive and raise two boys. And I hated it then. Looking back on it now, I'm so incredibly impressed with her. Wow. I mean, I just had a conversation with her a little bit ago. I said, Mom, what were you making back then? Monetarily.
Yeah.
And we're talking 80s and 90s, right? And I think she's like, son, sometimes I was making 1,000 a month, 1,500 a month. And because of our family, kind of like my grandmother and my grandfather and like their morals and their we just never went on any sort of like assistance ever. She never took a government assistance, food stamps, I don't even like whatever is out there during that time, whatever was, part of the deal, but, never took anything. And she just worked. She'd worked 2 jobs, worked as much as she needed to make it happen. And, we were pretty poor. But that taught me so much without knowing. That taught me so much flexibility and resilience and being appreciative of what you have. Mm-hmm. And it's a lesson that you just can't fabricate almost.
I love that you have the gratitude in that, man, because I don't need to tell you this, but that's a conscious decision. You can either look at that as like, hey, I'm a victim. I had all these things happen to me as a kid. This is why my life is going to turn out the way it is or the way it has. Instead, having gratitude. I mean, the way I was brought up, man, it was very chaotic. My mom was married, from the time I was 0 to 18. She was married 3 times, dated several men in between. All of them were just disasters.
There was some of that too.
Yeah.
There's some of that too. We can get into that, but there was some of that sprinkled on top.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, and I do want to get into that, but the funny thing is that in my 20s, I'm in my 40s now, I did really lean into that sort of victim, like, oh, I can't have a successful relationship because I've never seen one. And then
that's a scapegoat, right? For you.
Is. It totally is. And it probably was when I got married and started having kids around 30. I was like, you know what if I gave gratitude to how I grew up? And what if I just learned that as like, hey, that was part of just how I grew up. And I got to learn some amazing lessons in that. Right. And that's where I'm at now, which is gratitude. So older brother or younger brother? You grew
younger
up
brother. Different dad.
Different dad. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Not that it was weird. Like it was like me and him. We were like our own little Sandlot movie growing up. It really was. We did have a few years down the road, we did have a stepfather who was abusive. My mom didn't know. As soon as she found out, there was one incident that occurred that kind of, I hit puberty and I was like 11. I hit puberty very young. But I think I was 11 years old. There was a morning incident. It got very loud. A lot of things were broken. That's when she found out that this stuff had been going on for years. And then he was out of the picture immediately.
Do you feel comfortable sharing what it was?
Yeah, he was just abusive.
Just like physically, mentally?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, physically with me, mentally with my brother.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's weird how he picked and choose. He didn't live with us 24/7. He took like I think he was doing like working on gas oil rigs. So he'd be gone for like 8 months at a time and then come back for a few months. And then, he really wasn't in the picture, but man, when he was in the picture, it was not great.
It was ugly.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was, so talking about that, like talking about your background, there's plenty of people that let's be real. There's a lot of people that come from backgrounds like that, extremely poor. The system is working against you. By the time I was 11 or 12, I had 2 felonies, like adult felonies.
By the time you were 11 and 12, 2 felonies.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. Burglary of a conveyance and then a weapon on school grounds. Yeah. And then some misdemeanors and in and out of juvie. So I could have very easily had all the excuses to turn out a certain way, right? To turn into a certain type of person, either go to jail or just be a garbage human being. And then have that kind of victim mentality. Like the reasons why I am the way I am is because, we grew up poor. We didn't have opportunities, blah, 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 abusive stepfather, not an active father in the home. Tons of them. Right. But none of that really matters.
So do you know your biological father?
Yeah. Yeah.
You do. Was he in the picture growing up at all?
Very, very little, very, very little. Yeah.
So when you say
we didn't really like, there was like a weekend here and there. It just wasn't there. It wasn't a consistent basis to where he had an impact, if that makes sense.
Got it. Okay. So it's kind of odd how your background and my background sound scary, sort of similar, but when did, so you saw him sporadically growing up. When did that change? And now it's
actually I wrote him a letter. So fast forward through all the BS and me getting kind of healthy and clean. And as a teenager, I wasn't doing by the time I'm like 13, 14, I'm like not drinking, not doing drugs, going to church, and I'm like, no, I don't do that anymore. I'm like cleaned up my life. When usually that's about the age when kids start doing that kind of stuff. Right.
Right. Right.
But I was like seen it inside of a couple of jails. Ended up having to go to county jail one time because juvie was full. So I was like a 11, 12-year-old kid inside of a county jail. And I'm like,
oh my God, dude.
Yeah. I'm like, I think I'm good. I don't think this is the life for me. And anyways, so fast forward and a lot of things happened, but fast forward, I ended up decided I was going to join the military. And so I went, that was a whole process into itself because of me dropping out of school, the felonies, a million things that I had lined up against me. And I've made videos on that on YouTube explaining the whole story. And, but anyways, while I'm in recruit training at Marine Corps recruit training in Parris Island, I wrote him a letter basically outlining everything that I was feeling. And, the fact that I'm going to make something of myself in spite of something. And I don't owe you anything. You don't owe me anything. And, so he got that letter and he actually showed up to my graduation.
Did you know he was going to be there?
No, had no idea.
Wow.
No idea. He couldn't, obviously. If you ever seen a Marine Corps graduation, like trying to pick out your son in a crowd, is like everybody looks the same. It's a bunch of skinny, shaved head guys. You know what I mean? And anyways, so I happened to be the company honor grad. So I was actually standing right in front of him. And anyways, so he reapproached me and then we kind of caught up there. And then that's kind of really the beginning of our kind of rekindled relationship.
So real quick, you were standing right in front of him. Did you recognize him out there?
We were in the ceremony. I didn't see anybody.
Got it. Okay.
He was up in the stadium or in the seats.
Got it. Okay.
And, but yeah, didn't notice. And that's really when things started to kind of turn around.
So what was the first What was the first step in that relationship being rebuilt?
A lot of communication, and just, a lot of understanding from, and not placing blame, right? Like it depends on what you want to get out of a situation. If you want to act like a victim and place blame on everybody and you're wrong and this isn't fair and that's not fair, you're going to get nowhere. You're just going to be the same where you're at. But if you want things to improve, you got to take a different approach. You have to forgive. You have to see things from different perspectives. Not that he wasn't wrong or he was right. That's where I feel like people are they have such a hard line of what's right and wrong. And the fact is, life is messy, man. Life is so messy, and it's just not that clear, especially when you're dealing with decades of marriage and kids and, why they get divorced and why this happened. And did my mom do something wrong? Did he do something wrong? Like, who pissed who off? This stuff is messy, man. Life is messy. So you can turn your life into, or turn a situation into whatever you want it to turn into. You can allow it to be what it is, or you can make it something else. And I wanted to make it something else.
It's crazy, man. My mom and biological father were married when 4 years before they got divorced. They had me, and a year after I was born, they got divorced. They split up. For the first, I never knew him ever. Ran into him by accident when I was 12. We had this, we had this quick, I won't get into it because this show's about you. It's not about me, but I just want to share some alignment here. We got reunited when I was 12. He was remarried at the time, 2-year-old son, another one on the way. And it lasted 6 months. And then he had a conversation with me of like, hey man, this is not a good time for me. It's me. It's not you, blah, blah, blah. We split. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to I was 30, 18 years later, we ran into each other at Starbucks. Completely random. I was there for a business meeting. He came in to get his morning coffee. Boom. Now we've had a relationship now for the past 16 years. And that's where our relationship started, again. And what I can tell you is exactly, we've put the same perspective and lens on our relationship as you have with you and your dad, where we've had 1 or 2 conversations, maybe 3 over the past 16 years about the past. Mm-hmm. But we've both decided like the past was the past. Decisions were made. Wrongdoings happened, but we can either dwell on that, make our relationship miserable, or we can see like, hey, what can we create moving forward? My dad's 73 years old.
Exactly. What do you want out of the future?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's your life and you can carve it up however you want it to be.
Do you see him regularly now? Is he kind of a part of your life, kid's life?
Yeah. Yeah. And we just took my son down there because he's named after him.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's cool, man. Very cool. So let's get into, so it sounds like let's move backwards again. You obviously got into some things that taught you a really hard lesson when you got put in county jail. I can't even imagine 11. I mean, I have a kid who's 14. I'm thinking back when he was 11 and 12, like being in jail, like he was probably like, oh my God, like, what have I done? Like then he hasn't been there, but I can just imagine 11 or 12-year-old, what you're thinking in there. So made the decision there. You're like, okay, yeah, I'm not doing these things anymore. And then take me through, you mentioned something about high school.
Dropping out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not as like dramatic as it is. I was living in Florida. I was in Panama City Beach, Florida. And I was living in Panama City Beach, Florida. I was working at Bay Point Marriott as a bellman. And in the morning I was an audio visual tech. So I was letting we're talking the 90s and I'm getting paid $15 to $18 an hour. And then on the bellman side, I'm making hundreds a day in tips. This nice swanky hotel resort, golfers coming in. I literally would drive a guy to the golf course and he'd give me $100 bill tip. You know what I mean? So, and here I am, 16 years old. And, so when it came time to go back, and I'm talking I'm making thousands a week for a 16-year-old.
That's awesome.
When it was time to go back to school, I was like, this doesn't make physical sense. Like, just, which is funny now, because looking at who I am now and what I do in my life now, it's like, oh, I was always this person. I just didn't have, the experience. But so I like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I can't give up making thousands of dollars a week to go sit in a classroom for 8 hours that I make C's and D's on. Like, how am I going to provide for myself? You know what I mean? Like, this doesn't make any sense. So I didn't go back. I graduated the 10th grade and I didn't go back. At the time, you could go to get your GED in Florida at that age. So when I was eligible, I just went and got my GED and took the test, and I was done.
Dang, man.
And then went on, I moved out around 16, right around that time. I moved out, got my own place, got my own house on the beach.
At 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
16-year-old with his own house on the beach.
Yeah. I was just doing my own thing, man, living life.
I can't even imagine, man. Oh my God.
But see, I think that's what led me to the military, because now I'm doing these things. I'm making money. I've got my own car. I've got my own life. I'm 16 years old. And a little bit down the road, it hit me. I was like, oh man, in 20 years, I could be doing the exact same thing right here on the beach in Panama City Beach, doing the same jobs. Yes, I'm making money, but and I kind of panicked.
I can see that.
So I nuked everything, man. I nuked my life.
You know what though, man? I gotta give you some props, man. That's a very bold decision when you're a 16-year-old, because at 16 you're making that. I mean, I think you and I are right around the same age. You're a 16-year-old in the 90s. You're making thousands of dollars. You have your own house on the beach, your car. You're like, yeah, I've made it. I've arrived. I think I'm good for I'm just going to retire doing this.
Right.
So I'm super interested now to hear what was the flip that switched? So there are two ways to look at that when you're 16, and I could see a 16-year-old, both of these scenarios would make sense. You could be like, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. This is awesome. Or I'm gonna be like, oh crap, I'm gonna be doing this for the rest of my life.
But so you have to look at the way I grew up.
Right.
Every 6 months was a change. It was a constant adventure.
True. Very
and
true.
Now all of a sudden I'm looking at the next 20 years of my life going, it's going to be the exact same.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be the old dude. I'm going to be the old dude living on a house on the beach, right. I don't know, doing whatever there is to do on Panama City Beach. And I'm sure I would have been successful, and I'm sure I would have, done whatever. Cause I think that because of my work ethic, my personality, it was inevitable that I was going to achieve some level of success.
Right.
Just because I was never going to quit working. I was never going to quit trying to move the needle forward. But that moment hit me, like you said, oh my God, I could be doing this for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like straight panic.
What was it about the military then, of all things? Of any direction you could have gone in?
It was a way out.
Okay.
How as a teenager, how do you say, I'm going to go do this job or move to this city or do, for me, I didn't have those kind of opportunities. You know what I mean? I was a high school dropout, not good at school, not that kind of not institutional learning the way that our federal government wants us to learn. That's not for me. It's honestly not for everybody, but that's a different conversation. So I saw the military. It was like back in the 90s, you remember, it was like life of adventure. We'll send you around the world. You'll travel everywhere. You'll get paid. I'm like, oh my God, this sounds awesome.
Yeah. I remember those commercials, man.
This is pre-war, right? So it's like everything was roses and rainbows. It was just like, oh, you get on a boat, you go travel the Med and see all these different countries and meet all these different women. I was like, well, that sounds awesome. And so I went to the recruiter and goes, and I said, hey, I want to join. He's like, oh, awesome. Sit down. And then he ran my background check.
Oh,
and he came in. He's like, dude, never and ever are you getting in the military.
Wow. So this guy was just like line drawn in the sand. Boom. There.
I mean, 2 felonies, drugs, high school dropout, like we didn't need people in the 90s, right? People were, we had high quality individuals that were graduating high school, signing up with nothing. And so he was like, yeah, sorry, ain't going to happen.
Wow.
That right there is what I needed.
How so?
He told me no.
But you eventually got in.
Oh yeah.
How?
He told me no.
Right. So what did he tell you to go do?
Leave. Don't come back.
All right. And I'll see you tomorrow.
But right. Exactly. I was like, oh no, huh? Okay. Roger that. And that's what I mean by nuked my life. I mean, I quit my jobs. I gave up my house. I moved in with my grandmother. I went to community college. I worked nights at a movie theater for like pennies on the dollar. I think I was getting minimum wage, whatever minimum wage back in the 90s was, like $5.75 or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I was working the night shift as a projectionist. So I'd go to school all day, work the night shift for nothing, eating money, essentially. I lived with my grandmother, and I did that for almost 2 years before I could get in.
So you gave up like the house on the beach, the car, the thousands of dollars, go live with grandma. I'm going to go work in a movie theater, go back to school because you wanted to get in the military that bad.
Yep. That was my mission. He told me no, and I'm going to show you how you're wrong and I'm a good fit. So
what did you actually have to overcome? Like, was it a period of time till that was wiped off your record?
No, it was just all waivers. So if I got a certain amount of college credits, then it waived my high school dropout. So I no longer was a high school dropout. I was a college student. You know what I mean? So that like set a precedence. I got like 100 letters of recommendation.
Wow.
At one point when I was in trouble, my mom put me on medication. And so like I think it was like she thought because I was being bad, she's like, maybe he's got like a syndrome, like ADHD or something. It's like, no, I was just a bad kid. I was angry. So I had to go through that. Obviously the legal things, I had a couple misdemeanors, felonies, had to work my way through that. A horrible test taker. So I had to take the ASVAB a couple times because I couldn't just take the ASVAB and get a score. I think I had I had to have above a certain score because of all of my issues. So I had to like study and take this test like 2 or 3 times.
Wow, man.
It was a drag, man. It was a drag, but I finally got approved and went in.
You're a badass, dude. And I mean that very humbly. Like a lot of people would be like, yeah, there's no overcoming felonies and there's no overcoming the high school dropout. And by the way, the lifestyle that you had, no, I'll just go back to that. I just go back to that. Like instead of
that's easy, right?
It's easy. And it's lucrative, right?
Yeah.
Damn, man. That's awesome. Okay. So,
but what that did though, coming from my background, what I came from, what that did was it completely changed the trajectory of my life, because the one thing that the military will take you is it doesn't care what walk of life you come from.
Yeah.
Once you get in, your career, your opportunities is on you. So when I got in, it was like, okay, how do I level up? How do I get promoted? How do I change my life? And the next thing you know, I got an opportunity to take selection for 2nd Force Reconnaissance. And then special operations came around and I was able to take selection for that. And then when you decide to leave that command or leave that unit and that lifestyle, who you are as a human being, your resume, your record, your capabilities is so drastically different than the kid that grew up in a trailer park somewhere in Florida.
Makes total sense.
And it's all because you pushed. That individual changed their life and made their life what they wanted it to be.
So take me through how far did you go in the ranks in the military?
I actually got out I was a little bit of a problem child in special operations. I got out as a staff sergeant in Marine Special Operations Command. On my last team, I was a team operations chief. And that was 12 years in the military.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and just before we move on to, you had your first daughter when you were 20. We'll get into fatherhood, but I'm really, really curious. What are some of the game-changing life lessons that you learned in the military that still serve you today? And it can be in life, it can be in marriage, it can be in your work, your kids, whatever.
I'd say a couple different things. One is grit. Granted, I had a decent amount of it before, but then once you go through some physical things in the military, mental and physical things in the military, especially my career choices, right? I went through multiple selection processes. I went through multiple schools that any normal, I say normal, any regular person would consider abuse, mental and physical abuse. And you got to understand the things that these guys go through in these courses and these selection process are things that people can't even imagine. I mean, you're talking about days without sleep, days without food, having to like physically run through the woods and up mountains and fight people. And I mean, you're talking another level of human being.
Yeah.
And what that does for you is that gives you the ability to have a ironclad mindset. I mean, like there is nothing that you cannot get through.
Can you share a story of maybe one of the toughest things that you went through that might have pushed you to the brink of like, man, I'm so close to tapping right now. I'm so close to ringing the bell or whatever that is. And then you didn't.
I don't have one of those courses because of where I came from. I remember going on like ruck runs in like one of my basic schools. And I remember going through certain courses, even the intro course, the Recon Indoctrination Platoon, which was 3 months for me. I remember being like patrolling in the middle of the night, hallucinating. And I wrote this in my book talking about hallucinations on patrol. And remember mentally and almost, I think verbally saying that I was prepared to die on this road before I quit. Like I might fail, that might happen, but I mentally was prepared to die where I was at before I rang a bell or quit. And that took me through, like, if I was in the pool and I was getting drowned because that happened, there was no tapping out. You're going to have to kill me because I'm not going back to where I was. That old life, like that ain't happening. So I'm prepared to die right here before I go backwards.
It's really interesting that you say that. I had Chris Sinog on the podcast. He's one of the best Navy SEAL sniper instructors. He had a very similar story because I asked him, I was like, was there ever a time in BUD/S where you were at the brink? And he had a story almost exactly like that. It was when he and 3 other guys were holding up those rafts and they were just marching in a circle. Just keep going and going and going. And he said they do
that to find the guy who's mentally weak that says, I can't handle this anymore.
Yeah.
They quit. Yeah.
He shared a very similar story. He said, I feel like I'm to the point right now where I could die. Yeah. But he said to himself, I'm just going to die. Like I'm literally just going to collapse and die, but I'm not going to quit. So if I die, then I'm just going to die. Yeah. And, but it's crazy, man. But I mean, good on you for that. My assistant's, husband is in his final stages of Green Beret training. So he actually, as this podcast actually releases, he graduated, but it's been a 3-year process for him. So I've heard some just absolute insane stories of the things that you guys have to go through. When you say downright abuse, I'm like, some of the things he shared, some things you can't obviously, but some of the things he did, I was like, holy crap, dude. Like that's insane.
It's good stuff, man.
Yeah. It is. So what I want to do here is I want to talk just a little bit about your daughters, and then you have a newborn son, get into marriage a little bit. But I want to talk about these 2 topics that we're going to be talking about today, which is managing children versus leading children. Yep. And, this, what you like to call a planned attack on family and men. that we're seeing in the US. So I want to definitely dive into those two topics. But before we do that, you have two daughters, Ella, 20, Anna, 15, and Dimitri, who's your youngest son. So you were young when you had your first daughter.
20 years old.
20 years old. Now, there's a part of me that I'm like, I'm terrified for you at 20. Like I put myself in 20-year-old shoes. And now that I'm in my 40s, I'm like somewhat jealous because I'm like, dude, you're like a young dad.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's my wife. Her mom was 19. Her dad was 20 when they had her. And my wife and her mom are like best friends.
Yeah.
So what's the relationship with like with her?
So it's interesting. I mean, she's about to be 20. She's 19 now, but she is in her 19-year-old world which means that she is in her own world.
Yeah.
She knows everything and she's like out living her life. And there's nothing wrong with that. But she really has like got her big girl pants on and is kind of taking control of her life and what she kind of wants for it. And it's interesting to watch. The 15-year-old is still, she's a sophomore in high school, so she's still here. But you know, when she was born, when my oldest was born, I was 20 years old. Now looking back, and if someone else, every time I see a 20-year-old have a kid, I'm like, man, kids having kids, right? We all say that. And you really do. They really, if I look back at photos of when Ella was born and I look at myself, I'm like, I was a baby. Yeah. But I distinctly remember when she was born at 20 years old, I looked at her and I said, that is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah.
Like clear as day. And instantly. Now the whole pregnancy, I was, I don't really, you're 20. I was 20. I was in the Marine Corps. It was kind of like, okay. When she was born though, I was immediately, I fell in love. I mean, and you know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
That universal thing that happens. And I just was absolutely enthralled and in love with that little girl so much. Like she became my world, my absolute world. And then 4 years later, her sister came and changed it even more. And
you're still a baby at this point, 24 years old.
Still a baby.
Yeah. I mean, dude, that's young.
Yeah. But at this point, I got a leadership role in the Marine Corps. It's a little bit different, Now I've got a 4-year-old, so I feel like I'm a veteran dad, and and a lot of people in my age of the teams didn't have kids, and it was like it's a stark difference between a 24-year-old who doesn't have kids and wasn't married, versus a guy that was married and had kids.
Yeah.
There's a very much gap there, like an age gap, even though there isn't. But even then, you're young, and because I didn't have maybe the information that we share now, right, that you're putting out there wasn't really available the way it is now. Like you're kind of on your own. And if you didn't have like a strong relationship with like your father growing up, you didn't have like a network to fall back onto or a person to call. I was kind of on my own. So even though I loved my kids and I love them to the death, and I never wanted them to go through what I went through. At the same time, I still, like, looking back, I was much more managing them versus leading them. And what I mean by that is just managing the household. You got your rotation, you're making sure everybody has what they need. And that's really it. You're spending time where you need to spend time. But you're not, as a father now, I'm turning 40 in a couple of weeks. Now looking at it, I'm like, the father, you are a professor. You're the teacher, you're the provider, you're the protector. You are meant to be everything except a mother. Like you are there to teach your kids and lead them about everything. And that was one thing that if I could go back and do it again, I would have invested in myself more on how to be like, don't get me wrong, I was a great dad. I really was. Like, that's one thing that I can say out of all the bad things that I've done and all the times I've left and everything that's happened. That's one thing that I've done as I was a great dad, but I would have been invested in myself to be a great dad, like the best dad. And what that means is really, really applying yourself and your own education on how to lead your children and how to teach them to make them the very best versions of themselves.
So when you say you would, I mean, it sounds like you would have invested in mentors, coaches, books,
Exactly,
podcasts, like give me the freaking map, right? Because you already had the foundation.
Right.
The thing is like, okay, like I've got a good foundation, but I really want to execute as well as I possibly can. So
yeah, what happened? Like what I do now, like now I spend thousands. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on professional development, hundreds. And if I could, now it wouldn't even have cost that back then, but the value that it would have had me if I would have found a mentor or coach or something on how to be a great dad and how to lead my family, that could have changed. That would have changed. It would have changed all kinds of things. Now we still got here, right?
Yeah.
But like, what does that road look like, and how different would that road look like comparatively?
I want everyone to just take a moment and let that sit in, like let that just soak in for a minute. Let that hit and let it hit hard. One of the taglines of my organization, Nick, is live legendary, legacy is forever. Part of living legendary is not winging it. Right. And if you really think about it, how we go about parenting, how we go about marriage, mindset, we wing it. And that's really unfortunate. I'm the same as you. I have spent 6 figures easy in professional development, and I regret none of it.
None of it.
Because like when things happen, I know what to do for the most part. Right. And I remember flying blind. Here's a very interesting comparison. Can you imagine if the military, the US military, and take even your branch, the Marines, and everything that you did, selection processes, the whole 9 yards. And instead of very intentional, distinct training on exactly what to do, when to do it, making sure you're emotionally resilient, mentally tough, they just patted you on the back and said, don't worry, man, you'll figure it out. We're going to throw you into, a war zone, but don't worry. Here's your gun.
We're going to wing it.
Yeah, you're good. Best time of your whole life. You'll figure it out. Like, can you imagine the disaster of what the U.S. military would look like if we went with the same approach as we do to those 2 areas?
I think you said it right there. You said a bunch of things, but you snuck it in there. Intentional.
Yep.
Early on in my fatherhood career, I was not intentional with the way that I did things. Now, my whole life is intentional. Everything is intentional. Me and my wife spent 2 days talking about 2022. We went to a beach house down here, and we spent 2 days planning out the year, down to the way we spend money, what we're going to invest in, the trips that we're going to take, and everything across the board is super intentional. And that way, when something pops up, her and I are on the exact same page. There's no whammies. There's no anything. There's nothing that we need to argue about or discuss. It's like we have a plan and we are on the same page, and we are being super intentional about everything that we're going to do this year, to include what we're going to teach our kids and the things that we're going to do with our kids.
That's awesome, man. My wife and I have a very similar process. We planned out, we didn't dial it in as deeply as you did, but we did dial in the things that we went out on a date night, and I just said, let's create a 2022 bucket list, and not of possessions, but as of how are we going to connect? Mm-hmm. And as if we were to toast in the new year of 2023 on December 31st, 2022, and we're talking about the things that we did and the way we connected and how we elevated our relationships between you and I and these kids, what are things that need to be executed and done? And we made this list, and then we worked backwards. We're like, okay, when are we going to do these things? And we started checking them off and just booking them. And that is just an amazing feeling, because I think one of the biggest misses is that intentionality, because a lot of people, fast forward 6 months, right? Or like, let's just take the new year. We're talking about 2022. A lot of people have new goals, and then they get to July and they're like, what the hell happened to half the year? I haven't done anything.
Because it happens fast, right?
It does. It happens fast. So I love that, man. I want to talk about real quick, what advice do you have? One more question around managing children versus leading them. What has been one or two leadership skills that you've learned throughout your life? Could be in the military, it doesn't have to be, that you constantly lean on, constantly use with your two girls in particular? Because I know Dimitri is still pretty young.
Yeah. So I learned in the military, I hate to break it to everybody, the military is not perfect. You have really great leaders in the military, and you have a lot of really bad leaders. I'll say this, they're not leaders, they're managers, right? A manager is somebody who comes in, they just manage the situation. They're your boss, but you're not following them. People follow leaders. The people that you're like, if that guy moves to a different company, I would go to that company and work for him.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Those type of people.
Yeah.
So I learned that, and I took it to my kids, and even now in their day, and they might not notice it, right? They might not notice it initially, but over a period of time in life, they will look back and they'll make sense to them. It's not about telling your children what to do and how to do it. It's about showing them. Even my 1.5-year-old, I don't have to teach him anything. But if I show him something and he watches me, not necessarily even showing him, I'm just doing it. By example, he is learning. They're watching and soaking up everything. So these kids, my kids, they have watched me sacrifice, work hard, treat others well, take care of my team, take care of my family, take care of them, and be the person that I would want them to be with, right? And that is the biggest thing. It's like, instead of trying to teach them, show them. Like, kids, actually set the example.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
What do you want from them? Then you need to do it.
The best things are caught, not taught.
Right.
Yeah. If you want your kids to, we say this a lot. My wife and I just had this conversation. They're like, so-and-so's on his device a whole lot. I was like, well, you know what? You and I need to be off our devices more then.
That's what they see, right?
Yeah. If they see us on it, what do you think they're going to do? Right.
Yeah.
Man, I love that.
But that's the same thing in the military, right? The guys that I really have followed, it's because they walk the walk. And the reason that I want to, and I still look up to them. And I've got one of my platoon sergeants, my recon platoon sergeant, I still to this day look up to him. And we butted heads in combat. Like, there was times that him and I like went at it. But he was right. I was wrong. And at the end of the day, he always was consistent in what he did.
That's awesome, man.
And that stuck with me forever.
Well, consistency goes a long way, right? It's like we say it a lot. Does your audio match your video?
Yeah.
If those two things aren't consistent, you're not going to give that leader a whole lot of credibility.
Yeah.
So I love that, man. I want to definitely get to this last topic that we talked about before we hit record. And I'm just being real with the audience. I'm not sure what the attack, I think I have a pretty good idea. I don't know what direction you're going to go in here. But I'm very curious about, this attack that you feel that it's on families and men.
Yeah. So before we started recording, we were talking about two things. That the one we just kind of discussed, and the difference in leading your family and managing your family. And I challenge all men to lead and lead your children. But I look at I start looking at the issue. This all came down from like, why are things the way they are? Why are the youth the way they are? Why are even grown men the way they are? Why is our society where it's at? Look at crime, right? Look at anything. And when you really strip away all the bullshit and you get to the root cause of that, did that individual have a positive male role model in their life in the house? Most of the time, the answer is no. Yes. Did I turn out all right? Did you turn out all right? Sure. But the majority, it's an excuse and it's a reason to turn out a certain way that you turned out. And then I go like, well, why is that not happening? So if you really start getting into, you can kind of get into the minority talk, right? And you can kind of get into politics. In the 60s, we look at a man like Martin Luther King, right? Look at their households. How did those men dress? What did they do? They worked. Most of them, almost all of them, wore suits. They were a family unit, and that was the most important thing to them at a community standpoint. The family unit in that community was the most important thing, right? Then the government came in and started decentralizing labor unions and workers and courses that, you could be a plumber, electrician, a factory worker, all these things. They started taking all these different courses away. They started taking all these certifications away to where now you couldn't do that. What did people have access to? Drugs. So now you've got the agency bringing in crack and cocaine into the United States because we're fighting, communism abroad. So now we're funding, and this is all public information now. You can just look at any of this. This is all public. But what did that do to the family unit? It destabilized it. And then you got something like, what was it, the 1984 crime bill, where now you're locking up fathers for an ounce of weed, which is now like changing our country due to economics, what that's bringing to the country. It's ridiculous. So every little step has been taken to take the man out of a house. And then you look at society and go, you're talking about toxic masculinity. Now, all of a sudden, masculinity is bad. Well, if I look now, if toxic masculinity is so bad, how many % of teachers are women? How many households are by single women? How many nurses are women over men? So it tells me, if I look at the numbers, 75% of interaction of young men are women. Do we have a toxic masculinity problem, or do we have a lack of masculinity problem? Masculinity is not bad. It's not toxic. You're twisted. They're twisting the way that is. It's not. There's nothing toxic about standing up for others. True masculinity is how you treat your friends, how you protect your friends, how you treat women, how you speak to your mother, how hard you work, how much you care. That's masculinity. All this stuff that they label, that they try to put a pin on it. When a man doesn't have a positive role model, or a young man is constantly told, you can't be a boy, you can't be a man, you can't be aggressive, you can't, don't be you, don't be this. And they compress that. That is when the most negative, vile things will come out of a human being.
Like what?
School shootings, drugs, alcohol, abuse of women, raping, molesting, because they're suppressing what it is normal for boys to roughhouse. It is normal you have 4 boys. Do they not touch each other ever? They act like little princes all the time.
We beat the snot out of each other all the time. Like, no kidding around. Like,
it's like WWE in there, right?
Oh, dude. Like, seriously, I can't walk past my 14-year-old.
Yeah.
Without him punching me in the arm or somewhere. Or
Right.
like, he's an offensive lineman. So he'll come up to me and immediately, like, that's how he shows his love. Right.
Right.
And my 5-year-old, man, he's like a little scrapper. And my 8-year-old, he's a dirty fighter. I'm like, dude, you cannot gouge my eyes out when we fight. Okay. When we wrestle, you can't kick me in the balls. Okay. I'm not your enemy. Like those things you can't do. So yeah, man, of course, like we roughhouse. I mean, it's actually been studied that roughhousing with a boy or a girl actually teaches them physical literacy and teaches them how to problem solve quicker.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's an output. This is the reason why, like, I think that a lot of people in my community here, I teach the teens jiu-jitsu, and a lot of them put them in there. And I look at my son, and my son is even a year and a half. I see that he has this natural aggression, and I'm like, woo, we're going to have to challenge that.
Yeah.
But you're channeling it. You're channeling it, not suppressing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because when you suppress it, it's going to turn into something vile and gross.
I agree.
And that's the problem. It's the toxic masculinity is the problem with toxic masculinity is a lack of masculinity.
Or maybe masculinity with no direction.
No, I don't think so. Masculinity, even masculine, like, because that's saying that masculinity itself is bad without direction. And I think that's the conversation that we need to have, is like, masculinity is not bad.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. It's so timely. I know that this show is releasing in February, right?
Yeah.
February 20th, as you and I record this podcast right now, it's January 12th. I am leaving tomorrow to go to the Squire program with Bedros Keuilian.
I'll see you there. I'm leaving tomorrow.
Shut up.
Yep. I'm taking my nephew. He's 13
Are
years
you
old.
serious?
Yeah.
What? Dude, this is so cool.
That's going to be awesome.
Oh my God. I had no idea. Gay guys in the audience. We had no idea. Seriously, you're going to be there.
Yeah.
That's so badass, man. That's so badass.
B was my mentor, my business mentor coach. So my nephew turned 13. I called him up and said, hey, I want to come to the next Squire program. And I want to bring my nephew. He's 13, small guy. And he's like, you're in, let's do it.
Dude,
so we're actually working on trying to get one in North Carolina as well.
That's cool. Yeah. I told Bedros we need to get one in St. Louis. But anyway, back to, well, so shoot, I'll see you this weekend. Yeah. But I'm really excited about a program like that.
Yeah.
Because, same thing for you. I've told Bedros, I'm like, I want, and me and Mickler are friends, that he's doing one with Mickler and May, and, maybe doing one with you. And I told him, I was like, I want you to do one of these in St. Louis. You need one in the Midwest. Like,
absolutely
allow me and you, and we'll get this going here, because it's needed. Yeah. So I'm actually bringing my 15-year-old. I was going to bring my 14-year-old, but he's not feeling so well. So I'm bringing my 15-year-old last minute. But my 15-year-old's been, he's like, what is this going to be like? I was like, I really don't know. All I know is we get into an ice bath. I know that at one point. That's all I know. Yeah. He's like, what are we going to learn? I was like, lessons that will last you a lifetime, and lessons that are priceless. And he's like, well, do you know all of them? I'm like, yeah, no. I was like, listen, man, my backstory. I was raised pretty much in a fatherless home or by an abusive father figure. Mm-hmm. I couldn't be more excited about what I'm going to learn and what I'm going to be put through with you. Like, this is going to be freaking awesome.
It is a right. That is one thing that if you look at most cultures through history, there's always been a rite of passage for young men.
Yeah.
We have lost it because we are a hosh-posh of backgrounds in America. We lost that concept, and it's a concept that is much needed in young men. Most majority of cultures had an age when that man reached a certain age, he had to go through something to become, quote unquote, a man. Some sort of rite of passage. Like there's tribes in Africa that they have to fight and then stand on a pole for 3 days without falling off. You know what I mean? Crazy stuff, right? But it signified something that was hard things to make them mentally tough, to transition from being a boy to a man. The Spartans had the agoge. Native Americans had their own thing. The Mexicans have their own thing. Like they even have, obviously they have the same thing, kind of different now, but for women as well. But there's this rite of passage, and we don't have that. Nope. We just expect kids to wake up, get a cog in the wheel, become a good sheep, pay your taxes, invest in your 401k, pay, get some student loans, buy a house, blah, 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 and just go on. And there's no reason why men, eventually are like, I'm lost. Mm-hmm. I have no purpose. I feel empty. And then what happens is men start chasing girls and drugs and cheating on their wife and because they have no purpose, they're trying to fill a void. Well, these lessons start with fathers in the home and that rite of passage. And that's why I think this program is such a great, great program.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine if we didn't bring that up right now?
We just saw each other
just strolling in, be like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" That's awesome, man. Real quick before we head out of here today, you mentioned a book.
Yeah.
Tell us about the book.
Yeah, it's called The Excommunicated Warrior. It's my story of leaving. It's not necessarily a military book. But it's my story on leaving special operations. And when I left special operations, I had a very hard time transitioning. I didn't think I would, but it was more of an identity issue. And then for the next 4 years, I went around and spoke and talked about this from the veteran aspect. But the more people I met and the more people I talked to and the more I gave this keynote to, the more I realized that it was actually a human being issue, that we get stuck in life changes. And we all have this same kind of pattern that we go through when something happens, when we have to close a chapter of one. So maybe you worked for a corporate company for 15 years and all of a sudden they were like, "You're out, good luck." And you have to completely change your career at 35 or whatever. Well, that's a blow. And that's happened to a lot of people. So that right there can be very damaging, especially if your identity is tied up into what you do. Law enforcement, honestly, mothers with like empty nest syndrome, because like for 20 years, they're taking care of kids. They're a mother and what happens when a kid leaves the house? High five, mom. See you later. It's hardly even a thanks for everything, right? Their whole life.
Yeah.
They're just like, see ya. And they're like, wow, I just gave 2 decades to you. What? What am I supposed to do now? And the same thing with law enforcement. Obviously it's happening now, but yeah, 7 stages of transition. And then I kind of tell you kind of like a roadmap of where to invest in yourself and how to get past that. And, that the next chapter of life might be the best one. Why be afraid to turn that page? And the other thing that we do is I have a company called the Agogi, where we work with men that are not the very best version of themselves to become that, realign their life, create a routine, be intentional with their goals. At its core, at its foundation, it's weight loss and nutrition. But we go into the routine. Are they dating their wife? How are they interacting with their kids? What's their business look like? What's their time allocation look like? It's very much more in depth than a fitness and health plan. So we do things. We have one-on-one clients that we work with, and then we have we run 30-day challenges every other month. So if this is coming out in February, we have a challenge starting March 1st, a 30-day challenge.
Awesome. Well, guys, that gives you about 9 days from the release of this podcast. Nick, where can men go find out more about that? agogichallenge.fit would be the first link. And then if you Google my name, it's all there. I'll lead you there. Awesome, man.
Yeah.
And you can obviously go follow Nick on Instagram. That's where I've been following his journey quite a bit. What's your Instagram handle, Nick?
Nick Koumalatsos. Good luck.
Okay. Good luck.
Actually, if you type in Nick Koum, I think it pops up.
Yeah. Hey, not to worry, guys. Don't worry about it. We'll have all the links in the show notes for you. We'll have all the information about the Agogi. We'll have Nick's website as well as his Instagram, everything that you need. If you go to thedadedge.com/358 for this show. Nick, this was a pleasure, man. And I can't wait to be beaten down a little bit with you this weekend. That should be good. And dude, I just want to tell you, man, I appreciate and honor you for bringing your nephew. I don't know the story behind your nephew, but I'm guessing that there's some sort of fatherless environment going on there.
There's a situation.
Yeah. And for his uncle to step up, that's badass, dude. That's bad freaking
like
badass.
like you said, it will be and I told his mom's real nervous. And like you said, it is going to be a lesson that is going to be life-changing.
Yep. Yeah. It will
for both of us.
Absolutely, man. Well, Nick, thank you so much for coming on, man. Really appreciate you sharing all your input on leadership versus managing our kids, as well as what to do about, and I agree, there's this attack on masculinity that we're all dealing with. We have been for years. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing your 2 cents about that too, man. Thank you. This was awesome.
Welcome anytime. I need to get you down too. Get on the harbor site.
Can't wait, man. Let's do it. Yeah. Like I said, guys, head on over to thedadedge.com/358. We'll have all of Nick's contact information in there, as well as an application for the Dad Edge Alliance Mastermind community, as well as our brand new resource, like I mentioned in the mid-roll, which is 25 intimate conversation starters. It's completely free. It's a video series that I have. Teach you the whole psychology around asking your wife better questions that create more intimacy, more depth, and better conversations. Nick, thank you again. Appreciate you, brother.
Absolutely, man.
All right, gentlemen, go out, live legendary. Take care.